to their futures. Soldiers speak out.
Welcome to the Veterans Hour, a monthly program produced by the Rachel Corrie Chapter 109, Veterans for Peace in Olympia, Washington. I am Mark Fleming, your host for this month's program. Veterans for Peace is a global organization of military veterans and allies whose collective efforts build a culture of peace by using our experiences and lifting our voices. We inform the public of the true causes of war and the enormous cost of war, with an obligation to heal the wounds of war. The Rachel Corrie Chapter in Olympia is one of 140 chapters worldwide whose work includes educating the public, advocating for the dismantling of a war economy, providing services that assist veterans and victims of war, and most significantly, working to end all war. Each month we present a program focusing on veterans issues, and issues of war and peace. In tonight's program, we will talk with members of GI Voice, an organization of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans working to resist the increasing militarization of the Pacific Northwest. I'm pleased to have as my guests tonight Richard Capron, Eric Ard, and Joe Soul from GI Voice. And so I've introduced you individually. Richard, would you tell us about how you got involved with GI Voice and what it means to you?
Yes, well, I'm the only non-veteran in the panel tonight, but I was in my college years in the 1960s involved in training as a Marine Corps officer. Fortunately for me, I suppose, I saw the light about the evils of that war in Vietnam and decided to become an advocate for peace, and gave the rest of my life, the next 40-some years, to being a United Methodist minister. I'm retired now, and so I'm continuing my work for peace and justice by being a part of GI Voice.
I might point out that Richard has been a stalwart at GI Voice, which was previously Coffee Strong, keeping the books and keeping things in order. Really do appreciate that. And Eric, tell us about yourself.
Yes, I am a post 9/11 veteran. I went into the United States Army after the Afghanistan war and before the Iraq war started. I had a 10-year career and I participated in both theaters of operation. I left the military knowing that I wanted to do something to act as a countervailing force to the tides of militarism, and I found GI Voice in my search and the Pacific Northwest, and now I'm here and I'm doing that work.
Oh, it's good to have you. And Joe?
Well, I joined the Army in 2006. And I deployed to Iraq 2008 to 2009. After I got back from Iraq, with the experiences that I had there, I decided that I needed to become a voice and a fighter for peace. So that's what I started doing with IVAW at first back in the Northeast. And then when I moved out here, I found out about a GI Voice and started volunteering a little bit in the office here and there as I was able to try to contribute my voice to those efforts as well. So,
Oh, if I may say so, thank you all for your service.
Thank you.
This service. And then starting out with, what is GI Voice? What does it do? Anyone want to start out with that?
Yeah, I guess I could. GI Voice is, as we've indicated, an organization dedicated to telling the truth about war and its total costs. Many of our aims and purposes are very much parallel to Veterans for Peace, and as Joe mentioned, IREC Veterans Against the War. We believe that veterans have a unique voice because they've seen the realities of war, not the sort of the mythology that's perpetrated in our culture, but the realities of what war actually involves, and the costs, and both in terms of life and in terms of injury to all who participate, not just American veterans, but people in distant lands whose lives are just totally destroyed and disrupted in these fields of conflict. So we try to educate the public about this. We're involved in advocating for GIs who are trying to access their rights while in the military, and we help those who are trying to find ways to leave the service if that's what they want. We also educate about recruitment. It's hard to believe, but military recruiters don't always tell potential enlistees the real story about what it is that the military is all about. And Eric and Joe are laughing because they know exactly what I'm talking about. So we try to tell the truth about what life is going to be like when you join the military, not just the glamorous side, but the
There's
real
a glamorous side?
Yeah, that's what the recruiters sell. But we try to make people aware of what they're getting into and what may be in store for them. So as we go along, I can fill in a little more.
Well, also, too, this is not a new effort. I mean, GI Voice is a fairly well-established organization, dates back to 2008, I think.
That's right.
Started out as a coffee house. Well, actually, it started out as a radio station, if I recall, but quickly morphed into a coffee house. And were you involved with the coffee house?
No, I came on board after we got out of the coffee house business. We were doing so much work helping veterans get their benefits through applying and appealing VA claims, as well as GIs who are being mistreated by the chain of command. We just didn't have time to learn how to make coffee anymore and take care of that sort of stuff. So we devoted all our energies to providing services and doing the educational work about which I was speaking.
So now it's been being rebranded as GI Voice.
That was the original
Formerly
moniker
Coffee
of-
Strong.
Yeah. So, but we're known by Coffee Strong probably as
Yeah.
much as anything.
Well, it's a very well-established label. I mean, it
Yes.
was there.
We're known
started in
around the world.
2008. It was one of 4 GI coffee houses during the war, and if I recall, it was the last one to actually close. I mean,
Yes.
in fact, you're not closed so much as you have relocated.
We've relocated in Olympia. We used to be in Lakewood, right outside Joint Base Lewis McChord, and now we've relocated in Olympia. There's one other GI coffee house in the world, and that's in Kaiserslautern, Germany, the Clearing Barrel, and ironically, I was involved in getting that started as well. So
You have a history of suspicious activities,
well,
of great
a
service.
suspicious history.
Yeah. And Eric and Joel, perhaps you could talk a little about IVAW, what that is and where that came from.
You can feel free to go.
That would be your.
I can't speak for the organization nationally, obviously, but I was involved in some actions that they had, the 2009 March on the Pentagon, stuff like that, and they call for an end to both the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, reparations for the Afghan and Iraqi people, and all healthcare and services, including mental health care, which is really important for returning veterans. And those are 3 goals that I really can get behind, that I support fully. I support the work of the organization, and I think they're a great group of folks. Membership isn't limited to folks who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. You can be a member if you served post 9/11 as well. So it allows a more broad base, and they're a fine group of folks. They do a lot of great work, and they're out there speaking for peace. So.
And it's interesting, too, Iraq Veterans Against the War is the latest, I guess, incarnation of GI resistance that actually someone said as long as there's war, there's going to be resistance.
Yeah.
But most recently, during Vietnam, we had Vietnam Veterans Against the War, after Vietnam, Veterans for Peace, and now we have Iraq Veterans Against the War. So it's the people, who, as you said, who've actually experienced the war that are speaking about it.
Right.
Was there anything in particular about your experiences that changed your mind? I mean, you joined up, and now you don't think someone should join up.
Well, the change for me really happened while I was deployed. We would go, we went on this one convoy, and just to see the abject poverty in the villages that we were rolling through, and then we stopped, and this child came up barefoot, and his feet were covered in mud and filth, and he was walking through garbage, and he's like, Mister, I want some food. And just to see the suffering of the people, that decimation of the infrastructure that sanctions and, the two invasions had brought to that country was heartbreaking. And it made me think about our common humanity and how we need to get back to a place of respecting one another instead of killing each other over, resources or land or any reason. There's no good reason, for a war. Howard Zinn talked about just war and unjust war. There's no really just war. If you're taking another life, there's no justification for that whatsoever. And that's what really changed me was on my deployment. It really opened my eyes to a lot of things I hadn't considered before.
It's seeing another culture in a very different light.
Yeah.
Eric, did you have a similar experience? Or?
Yes, I did. I think that the ability to compare is often something that civilians don't get a chance to experience in relation to state violence, especially abroad. Soldiers, airmen, sailors, let me see if I can all of them, and Marines and Coast Guardians and the Coast Guard. We all go to the point where the violence is enacted, and sometimes we're on the other end, or at least we're in the vicinity. And that violence can be poverty, and that violence can be deteriorating infrastructure, and it can manifest itself as hunger or any other number of things. Over my 10 years in the military, there were a lot of significant events that I think turned the tide for me over time. The first being in the lead up to the Iraq War, I was already in the service. I signed up for the late entry program on September 9th, 2001. So 2 days before the towers fell. I was already through basic training and in formation whenever the discussions about should we invade Iraq, should we not invade Iraq. So before we ever invaded Iraq, I was already in uniform and opposed to the war. That was a significant event for me and sort of colored a lot of my experiences from there. I saw it from a lens of, I watched the news programs. I didn't think it was a just war. I didn't think that it was a necessary war, and I felt like there were ulterior motives even at that time. Traveling 2 countries, in Iraq in 2004, I was a casualty liaison, and I was the direct witness to many people passing from this life to the next, both on our side and on their side. Grown men, grown women, children of both genders, and I saw I was beyond a casualty liaison. I also loaded coffins in Afghanistan in 2025 ceremonies. So I had to escort people from mortuary affairs to a flag ceremony, and eventually onto a plane where they would go to Dover Airfield and meet their family for the final time. That was also a major experience for me. Just seeing everyone's life reduced to a small uniform aluminum box with the same exact flag, folded to precision every single time, and then I knew some of the people that came through, and I knew that they videotaped this ceremony and they sent them to their families, and the ceremony was supposed to be a summation of that person's life. But the summary that they gave those families was a summary of the military's current end state goals, and current desire for optics, and they just completely washed out everyone's voice and everyone's memory every time that they reduced them to a sardine can with the flag folded on top of it. There are many things that I witnessed that influenced my thoughts and brought me around to where I stand today. Those were some of the early ones.
So it's a striking experience. It sounds like you have real passion for the work.
Absolutely. This is my life's passion.
Excellent. Well, now that, in GI Voice, what is it you're going to be doing? Now that you've moved away from the coffee house, the resource center in Lakewood, you're in Olympia. So what will people expect, or what should people see?
Yes, so it will be different from our Coffee Strong location in Lakewood. It is no longer a full-service drop-in center, and we won't be accommodating that anymore. Our services will continue, and we will still take appointments, and we will still work legal advocacy, and we will still work on medical upgrades. But there's a changing nature of the war and our foreign policy environment, and it's no longer a position where organizing on the base directly or selling coffee is the most appropriate thing to be doing. They were great ideas at the time and how they worked, and now we find ourselves with the terrain moving below us, and trying to stay in step and keep a battle rhythm. So we are now looking at what I like to call place-based organizing, and by that I mean whenever we look at organizing against militarism, for instance, but that's not the only thing we cover, but when we organize against militarism, it's going to be through the lens of residents of the Pacific Northwest. And I think just that simple pivot has made a lot of our mission arise more organically. There are things that whenever you look at militarism as something that you can mark on a map within a 200-mile radius of where you're at, it's no longer this infinitesimally large, untouchable, abstract concept that's oppressing from afar. It's these locations, and it's these policies, and it's these structures enacting with these structures in this way. It's Joint Base Lewis McChord acting with City Hall and Port Angeles and Olympia in these ways. And there's things that we know are going to happen. There are points for intersection and to interject and elevate our voices. And there's a lot, and it brings up naturally the intersections with other groups in this community. Whenever there's an issue surrounding anti-militarism, it is never the case that is the only issue that needs to be addressed surrounding that issue. And we are going to be forthright in addressing that and being in a coalition in every step of the way in order to address the problems that we're bringing up.
So Richard?
Yeah, when we talk about militarism, we're not just talking about specific branches of the military per se. We're talking about a whole culture of militarism that's been developing over the last decade or so, where you'll see young children going around wearing camo, and with their own versions of assault weapons and so on and so forth, and there's a kind of a glamorization of the military throughout the culture by people that don't know anything about military life, and it's all part of trying to grease the skids of foreign policy that tries to put a heavy footprint on the global scene, that tries to project force as our American presence in the world. I'm just reading a book by Nick Turse called Tomorrow's Battlefield, and it's all about special operations on the continent of Africa. And you can count on one hand the number of countries in Africa where the United States is not currently involved in military operations of one sort or another. And all this is going on, and nobody really knows much about it. Yeah. And that's the way the government likes it.
And as Eric said, it's all connected. What we see here is tied to that.
Yep.
It seems like look back on the anti-war movements of the past, we're going to stop the war. And I think yes, we stopped Vietnam, but the militarism continued.
Yep.
And we didn't realize that, at least not until later.
Yeah.
Somehow we thought, oh, it's done, we can go on with our lives, and yet this military culture was continuing. We invaded, what, Grenada, Panama, Desert First Gulf War. We had a continuing war with Iraq long before we invaded.
Somalia, you know, there are just all sorts of places where the United States has been involved since Vietnam. You know, just dozens of, more than dozens of places.
There's
and
a meme that's
different
gone on the
operations. And now the face of warfare has changed. You know, there's a great resistance to what, you know, we call boots on the ground, you know, old style conventional warfare. Now it's all, you know, run by JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command.
Which are
which
boots
is
on the ground at some point.
sometimes, but it's special operations where they come in to some, you know, crisis area for like just a few days maybe, or a week, and by the time anybody knows about it, they're back home again. So, and there's no oversight with JSOC. If you really want to know about how those operations go, you read Jeremy Scahill's book, Dirty Wars, and you see how they just are independent of any kind of accountability to the American people. So all of this stuff goes on, and nobody gets to know about it unless they really take the time to dig into it. And then if you tell about it, like, people can't believe that that's going on, you know. After all, we're the Americans, we're the good guys. We wouldn't do stuff like that.
No.
But, and then of course drones and all this, you know, it just goes on and on. So.
Yeah, I think drones, that's a really good point. It relates directly to what you were saying, and that, you know, Obama, President Obama, I should say, does confirm a list on a weekly basis. It's a target list, and it is quite literally a kill list. Many of these kills happen outside of borders that we define as war zones, and I mean, it should be up for consideration whether or not those kill list confirmations constitute international war crimes.
And there's, you know, there's a great point in what both Richard and Eric said. It does come down to a base culture of militarism. From the time I was this high, I idolized the Army, I idolized soldiers, I wanted to be a soldier. So I volunteered when I got out of high school. And it came full circle for me, just as it kind of came full circle for Eric when I, you know, when I went to my first ramp ceremony in Iraq. That is a
ramp ceremony?
A dignified transfer ceremony where they take the coffins of the dead, covered in American flags, and they load them on the C-130. You know, our unit was asked to go to one. You know, our first sergeant said, "Hey, you'll never forget this as long as you live," and he was right.
I can imagine.
And you know, so it really came full circle. You know, for me, from, you know, the child that wanted, you know, that idolized the invincible soldier, to see, you know, those coffins going by and knowing, hey, it could have been you. You know, there's no reason why it can't be you. You still have 6 months left here. There's no reason why, you know, there's no reason why you too can't go home like that. And that made me stop, because it sort of broke that myth of adolescent invincibility, you know, because I was just turning 20, 21 when I was over there. So you still believe you're indestructible, but you're not.
And suddenly you realize how much at risk you are.
Yeah. And suddenly you realize, wow, you know, those guys didn't die off base. You know, they died in a mortar strike, or, you know, they died in a helicopter crash, because that's the risks of the job, and they were good men. And there's so many good folks in the military, but the institution itself, you know, it's run by the federal government. The institution itself just becomes so self-promoting, self-sustaining, that it,
In public administration, they talked about the self-aggrandizing bureaucracy. It's built to just reproduce.
Right.
If anyone's ever played the game Civilization, it has Leonard Nimoy has a great quote that the bureaucracy is expanding to meet the expanding needs of the bureaucracy.
Right.
That's pretty much the way it does work.
Right.
So now that you're here and you've had those experiences, how do you apply them? Someone mentioned you Eric, place-based organization. So
yes, how that would apply in the Pacific Northwest is and I'll make room for anyone who wants to speak on this, but how that applies specifically in the Pacific Northwest, I think you have to start with Joint Base Lewis McChord, the Army and Air Force field that were combined through base realignment. That is the center of West Coast, of that West Coast culture of militarism. Is directly tied into the military-industrial complex. This is where the military-industrial complex interfaces with the tech industry through Lockheed Martin and Boeing. This is a lot of our Joint Base Lewis McChord is fully integrated into the South Puget Sound in ways that a lot of people here don't realize. Joint Base Lewis McChord is the largest contiguous piece of natural landscapes in the South Puget Sound. It is vital for salmon runs. It's vital for bird migrations. The South Joint Base Lewis McChord property is vital for the continuing traditions of tribes in the area. There's a lot that Joint Base Lewis McChord is responsible for, both bad and just in terms of responsibility. In terms of how with those policies and how those structures interact, as I mentioned before, we can see there are several things that have in play right now with moving pieces. We can look at anyone who lives in Lacey or Olympia will note that rotary wing or helicopter traffic over the past 2 years has been increased dramatically, along with the noise levels. That was through an attempt for Joint Base Lewis McChord to absorb new aviation units, and they are trying to do that again. They were never authorized in 2010 to start flying over Lacey, and that's why they were stopped then. But new missile testing in the Pacific Northwest, they will be, the U.S. Army plans to start testing missiles this year just to the east of the Nisqually watershed, sorry.
Yeah.
It buttresses up against a creek that has a salmon hatchery. It is also an important place for migratory birds. We don't know what the effects will truly be on livestock as far as Lacey, because the Audubon Society has found the Army's environmental impact statement to be biased and insufficient. The Navy has determined that it can give 2 hours notice before shutting down any one of 68 beaches along the Puget Sound to conduct undercover operations with amphibious landings and submersible vehicles for Navy SEALs. The public is not allowed in the area whenever the SEALs are conducting their operation. They don't have a choice of whether the SEALs get to conduct any given activity. It's not subject to public scrutiny.
So let me ask, so this would be a beach that we would otherwise go to publicly to enjoy, and then suddenly it's just shut
Recreation.
down?
Right.
Actually, absolutely, and some of them in state parks as well. If beyond that, there's a new program for electromagnetic testing in the Olympic Peninsula. And in this case, you're talking about a 1 acre of cleared forest land to the west of the Olympic Peninsula, still in the Olympic biosphere, bioregion. It would, and an electromagnetic tower, and also 3 mobile vehicles. They would emit an electronic beam from around 12 feet high in the air, and they would beam them over low-flying growler jets, very, very loud, very expensive combat jets over the Olympic National Forest. The effects of that sort of noise levels, the effects of that sort of consistent radiation and electromagnetic beams, and the disturbance to recreation and to wildlife, and just the strike against the United States' largest slice of wilderness we have left after we've chopped everything else up.
Right.
And I think it becomes really clear that we are inundated with the footprint of JBLM, and they are expanding into public space and turning it into military space that allows public use, in essence.
Right, and there's actually another one that was proposed last year in July. The Army wants to do helicopter training in the North Cascades. And what that would be,
Let's see what they shake my
it'd be like
building.
75 practice landings in a given month. So that's
Oh, wow.
two a day.
Yeah.
At least one of the spots that they're looking at is within a wilderness area. Some of the others are very adjacent to it. So you, again, like in the Olympic National Forest, you're going to have the experience of very loud helicopters, military operations, just showing up while you're out, supposedly out in a recreational area. And they're now doing, I guess they've done a preliminary environmental impact statement. Now they're working on, I guess, a more formal one. But again, taking more of the public sphere.
Absolutely, and that is something that's tangible and that you can identify those stories and you can look at a map and you can see the ways and the patterns that the military is acting within your local region. And then we can submit to the public, this is what is happening. We want you to understand what it is, what it means, and then we would like to ask you what you would like to do about it. We can facilitate the dissent of the community and elevate all voices, but through the GI voices.
Without asking you to disclose your strategies, do you have any ideas or plans about how you would engage the public in these discussions?
Yeah, I mean, part of what we're doing is trying to, we've already been invited to speak at some classes at the Evergreen State College. But, you know, we plan to be doing, you know, some public speaking events. We are putting together a speakers bureau of veterans who will be available to go out and speak in community organizations, churches, synagogues. You know, so we're trying to put together a volunteer organization that can do this kind of educational work, that can help to build public awareness about their own choices that they can make in these matters. There's a sense in which, you know, with a national security state, which is something like what we have right now, the government can say, oh, well, we have to do this, it's in the interests of national security. And everybody just goes silent. Like, they don't say, well, is it? You know, in what way is this particular exercise in the interests of national security? And what are the costs? Again, we go back to the total costs of war. You know, what are the costs in terms of the traumatization of our environment? The U.S. military is the largest consumer of fossil fuels in the world. Just let that sink in for a second. You know, of any other organization, it's the United States military that consumes more fossil fuels than any other entity. And to a large degree, our foreign policy is geared towards securing access to fossil fuels. Whether we actually extract the fuels, that's not the issue. It's having access and control over them so that no one else can have access to them.
And if I recall, it was Jimmy Carter that said that the Middle East oil reserves are in our national
Carter
interest.
Doctrine.
Yeah, and we've been working with that pretty much ever since.
Yep.
Yeah.
So as you bring these issues to people's awareness, do you expect or think they want them to join GI Voice or support you?
Well, we want them to listen to us, you know, in the first instance, and then to take action as they see appropriate with, you know, governmental officials, with, you know, in the schools and in their local community life, and to begin to organize, to ask questions, to, you know, contest the story, the narrative that's being put out there by the government that gives them free range to, you know, do this damage to our environment, our population.
And you mentioned national security, so as soon as that is spoken, then all thought stops.
Yeah. Who's going to question?
Yep.
Yeah.
If you question it, you're unpatriotic at that
Exactly.
point. So
And
you better not question it.
And even when you do question it, it's ignored, because I'm thinking about how the millions of people that came out in 2003 to oppose the Iraq War, and yet we marched right in.
Yeah.
So just demonstrate, and that's part of, I guess, the military culture that's so pervasive, that even when everybody says no, it's yes.
Right.
Absolutely. I don't think, in our current climate, nothing has overruled a declaration of a need for national security, and it has been synonymous with oil. So one thing I find interesting and something to look forward to in the future is Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, was the architect of the Asian pivot. You may have heard of that before.
Pivot towards Asia, yeah.
The pivot toward Asia, and the pivot underlying everything about the pivot to Asia is the fact that in the past the United States has been more concerned about who is producing oil and keeping an advantageous relationship with them. And now we're in a situation where we have a competitive consumer of oil, and we are looking for a strategic way. It is 100% Cold War style containment, and it is happening along the Pacific Rim because China shares an eerily similar geopolitical stance in that region as we do here, with Russia acting the same way Canada does for our cheap fuels, with Southeast Asia working the same way Mexico and South America works for excess labor. They have their own internal sacrifice zones. They have their own, the Pacific Rim is the same as our Atlantic trade zone, and that is terrifying for some people.
Now, you mentioned an interesting term there, national sacrifice zone. Why don't you explain that for our listeners?
Yes, national sacrifice zone. This is my personal opinion, but I think personal sacrifice zones can be described as, I would say, in the past there has been a hegemonic entity that has controlled militarism in the world. Before the United States, it was Britain, and before Britain, it goes back.
There was a contest before Britain.
Correct. There was a contest before Britain. Britain would be the first one that completely transferred over to the system, but we took it wholesale from them in the industrial collapse of World War II. Whenever we had the highest, we had a military hegemony, we had the largest industrial capacity in the world, and we were geographically isolated from enemies. But since then, since neoliberal policies began to take hold, capital has decentralized from the United States. There's actually a massive west to east flow of capital right now, and something that is important about that flow is that we're still the military protector of that system, is that system has left us directly. So when I say pockets of sacrifice, they're the diametric opposite of pockets of affluence. So you have Manhattan and you have Baltimore, and it's the same in Mumbai and in the Mumbai slums. They're completely different worlds, and they're right next to each other.
Right. There's a lot of economic exploitation going on as a result of those policies.
And you also mentioned the idea of American exceptionalism. China has their own version of exceptionalism. In fact, they consider theirs to be have a far greater historical history than ours does. They go back, so they have they seem to think they're the same as we are, or better. They call us foreign devils. And if you look at their overall worldview, they've always seen China as the center. It's only been in the past few hundred years that they haven't been. So this rise to power is just the natural reassertion of what should be.
And we've been hearing in the election cycle a lot. Every candidate that you can think of talks about American exceptionalism and how America is the greatest, most powerful, wonderful country on the face of the earth. But it's, there's nothing that's inherently special about the United States. There just is not. We're just as good as any other people on the face of the earth. And that arrogance has to be dispelled. I mean, the party doesn't last forever, and of course, we all know from the fall of Rome and the fall of other great empires after World War I and the dismantling of colonial empires after World War II, empires do not last forever. And, we need to get into a post-imperial thinking mode. We can't be the empire forever.
I saw a magazine cover one day where they had two missiles on the cover, and one was just, a missile that said USA or whatever. And the next to it was a humanitarian missile. And they were both the same, they were both going to do the same kind of destruction, but one was supposed to be in a benevolent cause, and another was just, for...
Just depends on who's aiming it.
Yeah, it depends on who's going to be the recipient.
So you have a wide range of issues you can address, and the idea of the place-based organizing seems to make a lot of sense. I'd like to shift focus a little bit, talk about some of the other areas GI Voice is interested in. One is assisting GIs and veterans. As Coffee Strong provided resources for GIs who had questions about the military, about their legal rights, helping conscientious objectors. We had veterans advocacy. Dennis Mills and I assisted veterans in filing claims. So how is that going to continue with the GI Voice?
Well, in our new location, we're even more exposed to the correlation between veterans and homelessness. Anybody who goes through downtown Olympia is like, there are days when it seems like a third world country. I mean, there are so many homeless people. And, in our country alone, 40% of all the homeless are veterans. And this is intolerable for all the wonderful things that we like to say about the military and so on, that we have such a vast population of homeless people who have served their country. It's obscene. So one of the things, and you and Dennis are involved in this right now, is the sidewalk assistance program, where you're trying to reach out to people who won't find the usual channels, don't have the transportation means, the cell phones, whatever it is, to access services, and you can make contact with them and try to steer them in directions that will be of benefit to them. So we're trying to, build our services toward veterans and active duty GIs, at least in that regard.
And Joe, you were also interested in that area?
Oh yeah, I had worked before the state as a receptionist for the Veterans Affairs Department, and I was learning how to do claims. So it's something I'm hoping to get recertified through the NVLSP, the National Veterans Legal Services, and actually help with claims and give advice to current GIs who may have qualms about, well, I'm supposed to deploy, I don't want to go, what should I do? Or I feel like I was lied to by my recruiter, what should I do? Or I want to file a conscientious objector packet. Can I actually do that? I'm not a member of the Quaker Friends Church. I'm not a, well, yes, you can always state that, yes, I've developed this belief and it is sincere and this is why. So I'm very interested in helping, fight basically the militarization of society in the most peaceful and constructive way possible. So that's, yeah.
And Coffee Strong was linked up with the GI Rights Hotline. Is that still in place?
It is. We are not actively participating in the 800 number GI Rights Hotline right now, but we do have a relationship with them. What we do though is try to help focus on local needs in the Northwest. Through the hotline, we would be connected to people that might be calling from Georgia. Or,
that was a nationwide.
It was nationwide, and it was like, well, we could help you, but we're on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. We're 4 time zones away, so we're trying to direct our energies toward local need.
So now, if a GI has questions, they can call.
They can certainly call, and we talk to them and try to steer them to other resources that are available.
And we'll put that phone number on the video here, so they can.
Kind of give them a sense of hope, because I found at least that active duty can be a pretty lonely place sometimes, mm-hmm. because you're so regimented and you're in the thing, and you're stuck sometimes, and you get to feeling stuck, and That's why I actually love the GI Rights Hotline, because I called them when I was on active duty because we were about to deploy. I was away. I was a reservist at the time, so when I got called to active duty, it was like a completely foreign world, and a lot of these GIs feel completely stuck and lost. They're completely off the, just completely off their normal grid.
And the chain of command likes it that way.
Yeah.
They try to isolate you if you're going to be a headache.
Well, we discovered at Coffee Strong doing veterans work, suddenly we had veterans coming in saying, well, they're trying to kick me out. I want to do a medical board, and they're trying to push me out, and what rights do I have? Or, they want to do this. And, some of the stuff we hadn't trained for it, but some of it's pretty simple. GIs have legal rights. There's certain notifications that have to be given, and they are not always done.
Yeah, there's a big problem
So
with
we can-
JPLM, from what I heard.
So that you'll be at least letting people know.
Sometimes it's just the various branches of the service following their own policies. They don't do it very well at times, and they trip over their own rules, and that's where some of the mistreatment comes from.
Yeah.
I have to say that there are good people in the military. It's just that it's a little like rolling the dice sometimes. You don't know how it's going to play out for you. There are good people, but there are some who aren't all that supportive and helpful. They're mostly concerned with other issues, their careers, their whatever it is.
Unit effectiveness is the one I've heard. Is like if you have some problem, they don't want you. They want you out because they want to bring in somebody who can do the job. Exactly.
Who really gets promoted is the people who are institutionalized, who have that tunnel vision. Well, I've been here for 30 years. I believe in the institution,
And then you'd mentioned the sidewalk program, where Dennis and I are helping them access veterans benefits as just one way of dealing with the homelessness. The other thing that we can do through GI Voice by appointment is, if someone has a question about what benefits are available or how to file a claim. Not so much that we're going to take a claim and do it for you, such as, here's what you need, here's how you can file it, maybe help you put together the statements, but really empower the veterans themselves to do that. One thing, it helps the veteran learn the system. Other thing is, there's so much out there. I mean, we could not take all the claims that would come up. There are just way too many veterans seeking help, and it's a tricky system.
Yeah. Yes, I know one of the things you're doing is trying to train the people that you help to help other people.
Exactly.
So you get kind of a ripple effect. And so that's going to be a great thing to see unfold.
And actually, we're doing training for Sidewalk that teaches their advocates how to manage claims.
Yeah.
So that will help them access those benefits. Also want to talk a little bit about funding. I know funding is always a problem for organizations, and I know when you had the facility in Lakewood, it was a high cost. You've now streamlined considerably. But what is the source of the funding?
That's my bag, I guess. And funding is by donations. We don't have corporate sponsors or anything of that sort. So it's donor contributions, and fortunately there are a number of people that believe in the work we're doing, and sometimes they're smaller gifts of $15, $25, $50, but other times people have been generous and given us more substantial donations, but it's all individual donors. We sometimes get small grants from foundations, but that's a very small part of the funding. It's basically private donations, individuals who contribute.
So if somebody wants to contribute, how would they do that?
Well, they would go to our website, and right now you can go to it at coffeestrong.org, all one word, coffeestrong.org. And there's a donation panel there, and you just kind of go through the process, and you can make a donation. Or you can mail us a check. That works too.
can
And
mail that-
I think they're going to run the address on the
That's correct.
show at the end, and so people can send in contributions that way. We also, are glad to have people that want to volunteer. There are a lot of tasks that we're trying to put together, a list of ways that people can help. Some people, as I mentioned before, the Speakers Bureau, especially for veterans. And then, there are office tasks, sort of cyber tasks, people that are good at doing database work and mailing and graphics, all sorts of office things. I'm not very good at that. That's one reason I retired from being a minister, and yet I have to learn it now so that someone will do it.
So again, somebody wants to volunteer, either contact either the website or call the office.
Yeah, call the office, yep.
And then you also do a newsletter, is that right?
We do. It's sort of an occasional newsletter. I'd like to see it get more active. In the process of moving, everything got sort of thrown up in the air, and we're just kind of getting our feet on the ground again, and so hopefully we'll be getting that out soon too. And you can go to past newsletters on the website and read about some of the work we're doing.
Okay. And are there any events coming up in the near future? This will be a program will be airing in March. Anything that people should be aware of?
Well, we participate in the Arts Walk in Olympia. There's, what else are we doing in the weeks ahead?
In the weeks ahead, I don't know if it's in time, but tomorrow there's a small benefit show downtown. There will be more things planned, but for certain right now, we will be at Arts Walk, we will be at the Solidarity Wall, tabling, and well, I don't think we have any other planned events just yet, not public events at least.
But the Arts Walk is the last week in April, I
April,
believe.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know the exact date, but I think a lot of people here would probably know that in our audience.
Future programming could be pretty diverse, and it will reflect what Olympia likes and wants. We have the Just Eats archive, and we'll be doing art shows around that. There will
That's
be
a collection of posters,
They're made on
anti-war.
combat paper, right?
Some of them,
Uniforms?
yeah. Combat paper is uniforms that are torn up into small pieces, and there's a process you can make them into paper. So it's sort of like swords into plowshares,
A very, very good use. So we're starting to run out of time. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want to address? Covered a fair amount of ground pretty broadly. So I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight. Richard, Eric, and Joe, I wish you much success. And our chapter has been a supporter all along, so you can expect us to be participating with you in that. So I want to thank
Yeah,
you
we
very
have
much.
gotten a lot of support from not just Chapter 109, but many of the Veterans for Peace chapters have contributed financially and given us a lot of support.
Okay.
So,
Right, and that is one of the most important reasons to contribute either by volunteering or financially, because do we really want a world where there's continuous war, or do we want to take that money that's spent on militarism and spend it on healthcare and education
Exactly.
and structural improvements? I mean, I keep hearing how we can't afford these things, but they always want to increase the defense budget. Well, if you cut the defense budget, you can fund so many more wonderful things for the people, and we can have a raised standard of living in this country. And it's small steps of people working together to try to build that as a community. It starts on the local level and it moves nationally. So
That's a good caveat. I think it's another way people can contribute if they don't have the time to come and volunteer in our office specifically, if they don't have the extra funding to give. I know this is Olympia, and there's a lot of people working on a lot of things already. Just keep in mind GI Voice if you're approaching a topic that has to do with anti-militarism, with GI rights, or with any issue where we are on the same page, and let's form those collaborations, and out of collaborations come coalitions.
right.
Excellent. Well, we certainly look forward to seeing your activities and joining with you. So thank you very much tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chapter 109 has been a longtime supporter of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans who have spoken out against war and militarism here in the Pacific Northwest. Supporting their work is an important part of our mission as Veterans for Peace and educating the community about the cost of war. Our mission is an enduring one. And to quote Noam Chomsky, if you go to one demonstration and then go home, that's something. But the people in power can live with that. What they can't live is with sustained pressure that keeps building organizations that keep doing things, people that keep learning lessons from the last time and doing it better next time. That's what GI Voice is doing. That's what Veterans for Peace are doing. We hope you will join us. Thank you for watching.
Soldiers speak out. We can tell the truth of what we've seen. We are not liars. Soldiers speak out. We have a duty to all children and to their futures.